Hello everybody and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Genesis Invitational Data Dive Show. A lot to get into tonight. If you tuned into the show last night or watched today, you'll know that I had to cut the show short. Wasn't feeling too well. I feel a lot better tonight, so I'm going to hopefully make up that time lost last night and go a little lengthier tonight. So I have all your questions and things that you want to see prepared. It'll all depend on if my voice holds up or not. So with that in mind, let's get through the intro. All statistics are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. Go check them out. I say it every show. It's well worth your time, well worth your investment. It's going to make you a much better gambler, much better DFS player. Just go check them out. It's well worth your time. Links to my social media are in the description, where I post my betting cards as well as any interesting findings or research that happened throughout the week and during the tournament. And there's also an email in the description to reach out to me if you want to be a part of bonus content. This includes bonus videos, my tournament fact sheet, which has my favorite DFS plays, favorite bets, and whatnot. So if you want to be a part of that, then reach out to the email in the description. And then finally, chat is open. We're live. Have your questions ready, like I mentioned. It's going to be a lengthier show, at least I hope. So really want the interaction. Who are you thinking about wagering this week, or any wagers you've already made? Who are your early DFS plays and pivots and fades and whatnot? We're here for all that, as well as any stat and any player that you want to see or perhaps compare. So with all that out of the way, let's dig into the data for the 2022 Genesis Invitational. And as we normally do, we transition over here to Fantasy National. Hey, my camera works. When you're a one-man show, sometimes you have to depend on technology, for better or worse. Let me make sure chat is up. Hey, Josh, how you doing? How was your weekend? Did you do well in DFS? Because I did not. I had the double whammy of not feeling well and getting my shit kicked in DFS. So it was a fantastic weekend. So bear with me. My voice is still a bit scratchy. I feel a lot better from last night's show, but still a little bit under the weather, but feel a lot better. So we'll try to make up the time lost from last night. So we come over here to Fantasy National, and we went through some very high level metrics. I'm going to recap as much as I can, or at least as much as I remember, because there's a lot of things, especially in Microsoft Excel, that I want to go over that I didn't get a chance to last night. So, one of the first things we noticed, since this is at Riviera, this is a tournament that's on POA. The green surfaces are POA, and we looked at a high-level overview of the past calendar year, which was still only about 15 rounds or so, 15 or 16. So what I've done here, I have just gone in the past essentially 2 weeks, or past month I should say. I know it says the last 6 months, but the only two tournaments we've had on POA are the Farmers and Pebble Beach. Bad for me as well, went heavy on Seamus, Denny, and Varner. Yeah, Seamus Power killed me. I was pretty high on Seamus Power. Denny McCarthy, yeah, I thought he would play a little bit better. Varner I stayed away from just because I didn't know how the travel from Saudi to here in a week would go. What killed me, and I said it throughout the DFS show, if Brooks plays well, if Louis plays well, I was going to lose. My model never rates Brooks well, and it is what it is. Yeah, thanks, Joey. And Josh, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I feel like a new man, at least from last night, at least. Throat is still a bit scratchy. I've got not one, not two, but 3 drinks ready in case I need it, but hopefully I won't. But getting back into Fantasy National, these are the top performing putters just at the 2 tournaments that have been at POA or been on POA the past month, which is again the Farmers and Pebble. So the top 10 performers in those 2 tournaments: Mackenzie Hughes, Matthew Neesmith, Tom Hoagie, Scott Piercy, Seamus Power, Sung Jae, Mito, Bo Hostler, Brooks Koepka, and Pat Perez. Those are your top 10. So it'll be interesting to see how this top 10 compares with kind of an overall view. So I'm going to try to take a quick mental note of those names, and let's widen our perspective to the past 12 months on POA. And it's only 13 rounds, so let's just get a gauge on if somebody perhaps overperformed or whatnot. So the past calendar year performers on POA putting: Bryce Garnett, Andrew Putnam, Adam Scott, Jason Kokrak, Matt Jones, Kramer Hickok, Mackenzie Hughes, Bo Hostler, Wyndham Clark, and David Lipsky. So the only 2 names I remember are Hughes and Hostler. Hughes, traditionally a good putter. Bo Hostler is a good putter. Sung Jae lurks down here at 14th. He was in the top 10 for recency. But all of these names are different. So if we have time later in the show, remind me in chat, and we'll compare the past 2 tournaments, the 2022 Farmers and Pebble, and get a gauge on just how much guys overperformed or underperformed. That'll be something for later on in the show, because I got a lot that I want to get into. But that's the first thing that we looked at. We always look at putting when we look at surface types and green speeds and whatnot. And at Riviera, it is always fast POA. So I'm actually going to add the fast filter here, and it's down to 11 rounds, not 13. It's still, I'm imagining the top 10 won't change much, if at all. But if you add fast to the filter, so now we're looking at fast POA: Bryce Garnett, David Lipsky, Jason Kokrak, Matt Jones, Adam Scott, Hank Lebioda, Kramer Hickok, Andrew Putnam, Bo Hostler, and Mac Hughes. It looks like the same 10 in different order. Oh, actually, no. Hank Lebioda is now risen, and somebody has fallen out. But it's a lot of the same. You're only removing 2 rounds from the regular or normal speed POA to fast POA. So that was one of the first things we looked at. Another thing we looked at, as I remove the filters here, we saw last night, and I'll recome to the tournament conditions. Recome? Is that a word? I just made it one. Scoring relative to par is generally on the border between average and difficult. You do get a couple of easy rounds, especially when the course softens up a little bit. They'll do that if they expect a lot of wind. We'll check on the wind, as we always do on the DFS Tactics show. But if they expect a lot of wind, they'll soften the course up. But generally, these are always fast POA greens, and I would say 95% of the time they are firm fast POA greens. So it's on the border between average and difficult. I think technically it's average in difficulty, but you can see here there are plenty of rounds where it's difficult. So it's certainly on the border between the two. So one of the things that we looked at last night was strokes gained total on difficult situation, difficult rounds to par. And I used the last 36 months because it was surprising to me to see in the past 6 months how few difficult rounds there have been. For example, Matthew Neesmith is the most rounds played. The Houston you expect to be difficult, long, and the conditions for that were awful. The RSM, it was pretty windy, so that's why those got to difficult. But you don't have a lot of difficult rounds in the past 6 months. So I went ahead and went to the past calendar year just to get enough data to make it more relevant, I suppose. So your top 10 performers in strokes gained total on difficult courses or difficult rounds to par. Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Cameron Tringale, Paul Casey, Patrick Reed, Hideki, Victor Hovland, and Rory McIlroy. And I mentioned last night it'll be interesting to see how Rory comes out his first PGA Tour event of the calendar year. He's been in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Saudi, playing the DP World Tour and whatnot. Took the extra week to come over here, whereas Howard Varner, Bubba Watson, those guys came straight over for the Waste Management Phoenix Open. And Varner didn't play well, Bubba did, so it affects guys differently. But that was what I had noted about Rory last night. It'll be interesting to see, but I mean, he's clearly a top 10 player in the world. Shouldn't affect him too much, especially with the extra week's rest. But there was a look at the strokes gained total for difficult courses. Something else that I definitely want to look at is strokes gained around the green. And I didn't bring up the tournament fact sheet, but remember that Riviera is on Kikuyu for the fairways and the rough, fairways and the rough are Kikuyu. So every time Kikuyu's in play, I mention how difficult it can be to especially chip from. If someone is not familiar with Kikuyu, it's going to be a struggle for them. It is just such a different grass type. Most players mention that it's sticky. And again, not an agronomist, but going by quotes and stuff from players in the past. So your top 10 strokes gained around the green players in on difficult rounds to par. Matt Jones, Kevin Na, Brandon Grace, Cameron Tringale, Matt Kuchar, Charles Schwartzel, Jordan Spieth, Tony Finau, Kramer Hickok, and Patrick Reed. Most of these names probably shouldn't be a surprise. Matt Jones, very good around the green. Kevin Na is a short game player. Brandon Grace is as well. Spieth, well known. Patrick Reed, well known. So a lot of these guys, probably not a big surprise, but good stuff there. Anyone who's followed me for any time knows that I prefer strokes gained approach players. So in the past 6 months and or 36 rounds, let's just get an idea of strokes gained approach. Again, no filters, no difficulty, no length, just straight strokes gained approach in the past 36 rounds. You got Russell Henley, Justin Thomas. Those are actually tied for number 1. Tom Hoge, Russell Knox, Will Zalatoris, Taylor Gooch, Victor Hovland, Jon Rahm, Mito, and Cam Smith. So, again, you've got a world-class field. You've got world-class players. Russell Knox is the one kind of outlier here, but he's been playing pretty darn well. To his credit, the putting has held him back a little bit in recent weeks, as in a lot in recent weeks. But his irons are really hot right now. 2 top 35 finishes at Phoenix and Pebble Beach. The Amex was not very good at all, but he top 10'd the Sony. So he's been playing some pretty darn good golf lately, and especially with the irons. So it will not be a surprise come Wednesday if Russell Knox is higher than what you would think in my data model again, just because I am a strokes gained approach preferred analyst. But there's a good look at strokes gained approach here. Let's move on to some very specific metrics. And before I do that in Fantasy National, I'm actually going to switch over here to Microsoft Excel and begin the the parts of the show from last night that I didn't get to that I wanted to make sure I hit on. So we talked a little bit about the overhead metrics here. Here at Riviera, and this matched the graphical view of the course breakdown pretty much to a T. That putting is the most important, then approach around the green, and then off the tee. Then in this second kind of tab that Fantasy National has, there wasn't a whole lot of metrics that stood out. I mean, the lowest is greens in regulation, which is always the lowest in this tab, but this is a pretty high number in comparison to other tournaments. So, for example, Phoenix was the outlier this year at 50, but it was still, it was a lot lower than the Genesis leading into this. You've got, the Sony at 35. And remember, the lower the number, the more correlating success to high leaderboard finishes. So 36 is a lot more important than 54 and 51 and all that. So for this tab, there wasn't a lot of things that stood out here. Then we moved over to eagles and birdies and bogeys, and this was one very, very clear situation in that the bogeys are a lot more important. Avoiding bogeys is a lot more important than gaining birdies. And this is my default when I think about a difficult course, but at the Farmers, at Torrey Pines, it was actually pretty even. So it's always good to check, make sure that your initial inclinations, your assumptions are correct. And fortunately, it was at the Farmers. That was probably one of my best overall rankings results. And we're going to get into that because Riviera and Torrey Pines are such strong comparison courses. Because of the success that I had at Torrey Pines, we're going to look at that data model pretty heavily tonight and see what can be translated over to Riviera and what perhaps is unique to Torrey. But clearly, bogeys avoided are more important than birdies gained. And because I saw these two numbers here, the 220s, it reminds me that we're really going to focus on 2020 and 2021. Now, yes, I do have 5 years of data, but 2020, the Genesis became an invitational instead of an open event. So you had much more world-class players, a much better field in general, top to bottom. So we're definitely going to look mainly at the most recent 2 years, 2020 and 2021. It won't hurt to look back at some of the older stuff, especially specific to the course, because Riviera doesn't change that much. But in terms of specific golfer metrics, we're going to focus on the past 2 years because of the switch to an invitational. We move over to par threes. Sorry, I went too far for you. Move over to par threes. Fantasy National had this as the lowest strokes gained by par, and it plays out that way. Last year was really, really important, but I want you to notice that because of the focus on the past 2 years, it might be a bit more important than what this overall number is saying. So it'll be interesting to see when we go through Fantasy National a little bit later how much the par threes are actually important here. But no range of par threes really stands out. It just looks like it's the par threes in general. Everyone that is tuned in knows that I am a strokes gained approach player, and I am pretty adamant that strokes gained par 4 is the most important metric in golf. It has consistently been the lowest number in my data models. It is the most correlating success. And just look how consistent this metric is. From the lowest to the highest is about 2.5. The smaller the number in a gap between your min and your max means how consistent something is. For math nerds, it's standard deviation and such. So par 4s, very, very important, as always. The range of par 4s, notice that technically it is the 500 plus, that are, the most important, but I'm throwing that out because we don't have a full 5 years. So between the lengths of par fours, it is the 450 to 500 that is most important. And then it says 350 to 400. And I'm hoping that the Fantasy National, you'll be able to see at least from the breakdown. Yeah, okay. So bear with me on the skewed view. I don't want to have to keep switching back and forth. But the reason why I'm wary of the 350 to 400 is look at the lengths of these par fours. You got 434, 434. You have 408, so that definitely could become between 350 and 400. But 433. Yeah, so it's those 4 par fours on the front. Only one of them really threatens to be in that 350 to 400 range. And then you have the drivable par 4 10th, which is on the scorecard 315. I can remember a handful of times it measured 350. So the reason why I am wary of putting a lot of stock into this, do we really want to focus on one hole? Historical results say no. So I'm not throwing this out completely, but I'm definitely not going to have this range of par fours in the data model, any percentage. But I will definitely have 450 to 500. This is some pretty strong correlation here as well. It's a pretty low number. I'll get into the percentages here in a bit, but that is a pretty darn important metric here at Riviera. Let's look at the par 5s real quick. Again, other than this 24, it's pretty darn consistent. And even though this is a higher number, par 5s are still important. The par 5 first is a great eagle opportunity. So you have to take advantage of the par 5s here. And of the par 5s, again, because this doesn't have a full 5 years, I'm not going to put a whole lot of emphasis into it. Although the 2 years that it has been an invitational style field, they were very important. So again, we'll see in Fantasy National how much correlation there is. The reason why I'm going to give this more credence than the 350 to 400 is that 2 of the 3 par 5s on the scorecard measure close to 600. Again, sorry, one more time, we're going to come back to the skewed vision of the course breakdown. Your par 5s on the back, 583, reasonable to get close to 600, as well as 590, reasonably close to get to 600. Again, do we want to focus on 2 holes? Probably not, but it's worth taking a look at. But 500 to 550 is the most correlating par 5. More than likely, I'm just going to do par 5s. More than likely. Moving into proximity, and this is where the coughing fit really took into effect last night, so I really wanted to make sure I hit this. Proximity total, because the greens are so big, the greens are so fast, and the greens are so firm, proximity is going to be an important factor. Three putts here at Riviera are a lot more common than the average tour event because of the factors I just said. So you're going to want to get closer to the hole. Obvious statements are obvious, but it really is emphasized here at Riviera. And then in the course breakdown, we saw that the majority of the approach shots came from 150 to 200, broken out by those 25 yards. And I mentioned last night that a very crude eyeball research said that the 175 to 200 was most important. Turns out that is what I got it from, is this. And you take out this big outlier on the high end, this number becomes a lot more important, a lot lower. So those are the specifics for the data. But let's look at the evaluation here. And Genesis up here at the top, anything positive means that the course is or that metric is more important for this course or this tournament. So all of these are more important than the average tour event or average full field tour event. But notice that the around the green and the putting are so much more important than the average tour event, especially around the green, and that makes sense. A difficult course. Definitely going to be looking at around the green, some scrambling. We'll see about sand saves because it's over here at 6.6%. More important, we'll see. But definitely some around the green. I mentioned the tab that doesn't have a lot of correlation. You do have distance that is at 12% more important. Because the number was so high, I don't know how much we're going to get into it. But at Torrey, for the farmers, it was at 9%. And it was definitely something that I threw into the data model. So that is also something that I am going to consider is driving distance being 12% more important. Hey, Richard, how you doing? Thoughts on Laird as a value play when you get the opportunity? Elite in total driving stats, and I think T38 in scrambling. We'll get into that. Sure, we'll check Martin Laird when we get to Fantasy National. If you didn't see the show last night, it was pretty short. I was quite under the weather. I feel a lot better, so I'm doing a lot of the initial research, or at least the parts of the initial research that I didn't get into tonight. Just to recap, so this show is probably going to go longer, but we'll definitely take a look on Martin Laird. Absolutely. So how did your DFS go this past week? Mine was bad. But in this tab, driving distance, maybe. But like I mentioned, the greens and regulation were pretty high. That was a pretty high number. It's actually slightly less important than the tour average event. Fairways, not nearly as important. Good drives, not nearly as important. So, we'll see if driving distance perhaps is something we take a look at. Eagles, birdies, bogeys. Eagles, again, I don't know how much I feel this is important because I would say 90% of the Eagles on this course come on the par 5 first. And do we want to put a lot of emphasis on one hole? Historically, results say no. But speaking to the importance of the birdies versus bogeys, you can see here birdies are about 10% less important than the average tour event, whereas avoiding bogeys is 12% more important. So definitely going to be focusing on that stat for sure. Moving over here to par 3s, par 4s, par 5s. Again, I tend to struggle with loaded fields. Yeah, I mentioned in the DFS Tactics show that I went too far. Par 3s. There we go. I mentioned in the DFS Tactics show last week if Brooks played well, if Louis played well, if Burns didn't play well, I was going to struggle. I was going to lose, and that's absolutely what happened. I do feel pretty good about Patrick Cantlay. I had a lot of Patrick Cantlay. I don't understand why he was so little owned. I was really proud of the Tom Hoge call. I didn't expect him to win back-to-back tournaments, but I mean the guy's in fuego right now. Just ride the hot hand. So it was one of the weekends where I just didn't have the right guys in one lineup to make a big run. Most of my lineups had Cantlay and Burns together, and those lineups, by Friday were done. But anyway, so coming back to Riviera here, you can see par 3s, par 4s. There's the fancy formula. Par 3s and par 4s, slightly more important than the tour average event. We're definitely going to use strokes gained par 4, most important metric. Again, par 3s, maybe, only because, like we saw, this is it's been 2 years of an invitational style event, so we're going to focus on 2020 and 2021 mostly. Par 4s, 450 to 500, we looked at that mainly, and you see why. 12.5% more important relative to the average tour event. I mentioned how 350 to 400 is should be cautious. Par 5s, actually less important than the average tour event. I don't think they should be ignored completely. Just mitigated here, but you see here 500 to 550, 16% more important. That is what the course data detail was giving us. 600, 650, that's an outlier. Proximities. This is the big one I wanted to hit on. Let me scroll over for you all so you can see the entirety of the proximities. Okay, once you notice, yes, proximity total is, the highest except for this one. All of them are positive. And while 175 to 200, the majority of the approach shots come from this range, and it's positive, the first initial reaction might be to focus on this. And I don't think it's wrong to pay some credence to it, maybe even put, like, for example, a 5% in the data model. But because the proximities, all of them, are positive, that tells me that proximity total is very, very important this week. So I'm definitely going to have proximity total. I can guarantee you now at least 10%, maybe even 15% in the data model this week. And this is showing why. All of the positive percentages, no matter what range of proximities. So that is a look at what we normally do in the initial research show. Didn't get to it last night, so I wanted to make sure I hit that. We'll come back to this a little bit tonight. I'm going to come back to this tab for the moment. I mentioned how I wanted to take a look at the data model that I used at the Farmers, having Torrey Pines and Riviera be so strong comparison courses, and it just so happened that the Farmers was a very good week and weekend for me. I had the winner and an outright bet. I mean, the results here, this is probably one of my better rankings as far as cuts made, finishes, and whatnot. So I wanted to make sure I took a look and see what I used this week and see if there's anything we can bring over to Riviera. First thing to note, strokes gained, difficult to par. Well, we've already looked at total difficult to par. I think I said total to par. Difficult to par, so we can absolutely bring that over. Anyone knows I'm going to look at strokes gained approach. Strokes gained around the green, because we also looked at strokes gained around the green. In here, it was long rough. Sorry, I still need to scroll over. So these three categories I considered, but ended up putting 0% in. So they were kind of used as a tiebreaker if I was between a couple of players. We used just flat out strokes gained around the green. And I'd be interested to hear your all's take of whether this needs to be just kind of overall strokes gained around the green or strokes gained around the green on difficult to par. I kind of go back and forth. My default is just to use kind of like the umbrella stat or overhead with no filters. But I'd be curious to get your all's take. Greens in regulation, I think will not be as much of a factor as it was at Torrey Pines. So that may be one stat that might not get brought over. Look at this, the length of the par fours, absolutely the same exact length. And you see here at Luke List, while he wasn't the greatest, he wasn't terrible. John Rahm, who finished third, he was third in that metric. Sung Jae, number one in that metric, finished sixth. So definitely going to bring that one over. It seems like par fives could absolutely be brought over. This is not going to get brought over just because Riviera does not generally play over 7,400 yards. It can when they move the tees and such, but it doesn't. So this is 15%. That doesn't seem like it's going to be brought over. Putting definitely will be, especially the fast POA. I don't know how much the birdies will be brought over, but definitely the bogies will be brought over. So there's 20% that we could perhaps move around. I mentioned driving distance. Not sure how much it's going to play a factor. We'll have to look at it tonight. But that's, another stat that could be brought over. Scrambling, difficult to par. Absolutely. The 200 plus proximity, probably not. This probably gets changed with total proximity. And then par 4s, absolutely going to get brought over. So a lot of comparison there. And of course, percentages will change and whatnot, but there's a lot to bring over from the farmers. And only because I did so well, I normally don't go back and, use other courses for data models. But because of the, 90% of the similarities between the two courses and the fact that I did pretty darn well this week, I wanted to make sure I took a look and, see what worked, what didn't, what not. So there's the course 82 detail. Let me go back to Fantasy National here, and we're going to start really looking into the field and what guys are good at what metrics that we've been focused on. And before I forget, let's actually look at Martin Laird. And I don't have, Wednesday night is when I start doing the DFS stuff, so I don't have salary or anything like that. Martin Laird, you mentioned that he was elite in total driving stats and 38th in scrambling. So off the tee, positive, that's for sure. At least on the overview side. I mean, he loses strokes off the tee at the Farmers, which is the direct comparison course. Still makes the cut. Had a bad week on the greens, but he's been gaining strokes gained off the tee for the past 9 months or so. And it's right in line. He's consistent with it, so I like that. Let's move to the driving tab. So he does it not in distance. He hits a ton of fairways, which is going to be important this week. These are narrower fairways. No water on the course at all. The only protection that the fairways have are tree lined. Good drives gained, which is a subset of kind of greens and regulation, because this goes into this. So I like what I see here. Yeah. Okay. Then you mentioned scrambling. Let's go into scrambling, and we'll look at Martin Laird. You said 38th. Well, he's about 35th. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's check scrambling with difficult, because we used that at Torrey Pines and it had some success here. Now let's look for Martin Laird when it is difficult. So he comes down to 96th when you add difficult, and these 2 rounds are just those 2 in the past 6 months. So let's be fair. Let's bring this out to the last 12 months, get a fuller view here. So scrambling in the last calendar year when it's difficult, and he gets even lower at 115. So that part's concerning for me, at least the initial look, because I definitely am going to be looking at scrambling on difficult courses. I do like the off the tee metrics here. Good drives, greens. He hits a bunch of fairways. Doesn't need distance to succeed, which you don't really need distance to succeed here at Riviera. I mean, it helps, but his best surface is POA. Trying to get a gauge for approach, strokes gained approach. Yeah, his irons are great, or I shouldn't say great. They've been pretty darn good. I think you might be onto something here, Richard. Really, I like it. Traditionally, Martin Laird is, middling in my data models. Forgive me, I'm going to go back to my Farmers data model and look for Martin Laird. and where he ended up. He was 70th, so not high but not terrible. It's about usually where he is. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes this week. And again, not knowing price or anything like that, I usually do the DraftKings setup and preparation on Tuesdays. But there's a lot to like off the tee. The scrambling does worry me. That does worry me, especially since we're going to be on a mainly difficult course. So let's bring this out to, let's do birdies and bogeys. And last 6 months, I'm going to take a look at both the bogeys avoided just as an overhead and bogeys avoided on difficult to par. So your top 10 bogey avoiders just in general: John Rahm, Seamus Power, Will Zalatoris, Sam Burns, Mito Pereira, Taylor Gooch, Troy Merritt, Sung Jae, Tom Hoge, and Patrick Cantlay. Again, elite level players in an elite field. That's what you expect. Troy Merritt, I mentioned him last night in the initial research show. Like, he's been playing some really darn good golf. I mean, look at the irons. They're really, really hot right now. He is traditionally a better putter than what he has shown. Now, granted, Pebble Beach was POA. He did putt that well. He did not play the Farmers. POA is his best surface. Like, there's a lot to like with Troy Merritt lately, and he has been avoiding his bogeys. So it does concern me that the around the green is historically not his strongest suit. So that is one thing to take note on Troy Merritt. But there's a lot to like with Troy Merritt. At least, he's playing well right now. So there's a look at your top 10 bogey avoiders just in general. I'm going to try to take a quick snapshot of names here, and let's add difficult to par. So your top bogey avoiders on rounds difficult to par: Cameron Tringale, James Hahn, Seamus Power, Siwoo Kim, Tyler McCumber, Hideki, Cam Smith, Mac Hughes, Tom Hoge, and Robert Streb. Or Streb. I can't remember how it is. Actually, well, it is 11 rounds, so maybe, you know what, we've been doing 12 months for the for difficult. Let's do 12 months. So apologies, there was the 6 month view of the bogey avoiders. Let's do a fuller picture. So your top bogey avoiders on difficult to par rounds in the past calendar year: Cameron Tringale, Colin Morikawa, John Rahm, Justin Thomas, Victor Hovland, Hideki, Patrick Cantlay, Cam Smith, Sung Jae, Brian Harmon, and Abraham Answer. So a little bit more overlap. Tringale was number one in both 6 month and calendar year. I believe, I know Hideki was both 6 month and 12 month. Cameron Smith, I believe, was on both. I know Sung Jae was on both, regular and difficult. Hovland, maybe, I think was. I know John Rahm was. So there's a good look at your top bogey avoiders, and that metric that should play quite well this week. So that was the first thing to look into. Fairways and greens. Let's look. We looked at scrambling. Let's take a look at greens just to see. And I'm not going to even look at the over. No filter, the broad view. I'm going to go straight into greens and regulation on difficult courses. So top 10 greens and regulation on difficult to par rounds: Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, John Rahm, Hideki, Patrick Cantlay. There's Russell Knox, Paul Cantlay, boy, that would be a great golfer if you combine those two. Paul Casey, Abraham Answer, Aaron Wise, Griot, Rory, and Joaquin Niemann. So good stuff there. Your premier iron players: Corey Connors, Rahm, Morikawa. Let's see. Let's look at. I did not mean to do that. Let's go to proximity total. This one I am going to take a broader view. I'm not going to have the difficult to par filter on. Let's just take a look at total proximity, your top 10 in the past 6 months or 36 rounds. Your top proximity players: Joel Damon is number 1, John Rahm, Tom Hoagie, Shez Reavie, Russell Henley, Will Zalatoris, Finau, Knox, Merritt, Griot, and Keegan Bradley. Interesting stuff there. To Richard's point, Martin Laird, I just noticed his name down here. He is 25th. So that's a good thing to look at there. Absolutely. And he seems to be okay at the length of the most important approach shot length here, 175 to 200. He's 55th. It's not terrible. It's not. I classify it as good. It's not great. Definitely not elite, but it's good. So, good stuff there. Finau. I mentioned it, I think, a little bit last night on the show. Like, his irons are still there. Tony Finau does Tony Finau things on the greens. And that was a big reason why I did so well at the Farmers. He just had a bad week because generally he putts POA okay, and he didn't that week. And as much as I lost for Brooks and Louis playing well this past week in Phoenix, I did just as well or better, fading Finau, fading Burns that week, and all that. So, but the irons are still there for Finau. This seems like it could be a Finau type course. Obviously lost in the playoff last year, but has some pretty good success here overall at Riviera. So Finau might be somebody to look at. Again, I don't know salaries. I don't know ownerships yet. I don't go into that until Tuesday and then Wednesday for the show. Let's see. So there's a look at proximity. I'm going to skip par 3s for now. Let's go straight into par 4s and the length of the par 4s. Strokes gained par 4. Your best performers, strokes gained par 4. John Rahm, Justin Thomas, Seamus Power, Patrick Cantlay, Cam Smith, Sung Jae, Henley, Xander, Luke List, and Troy Merritt. Boy, Troy Merritt has popped on a lot of these models, and that scares me. That means Troy Merritt's probably going to be in the top 20 of my data model. Ugh, that scares me. He's been playing great. He's been making cuts. So, again, depending on price, he might be a value. But, boy, that just scares me, having seen him pop on these data models. Because that means I'm going to use Troy Merritt. That scares me. Let's look at 450 to 500. The range of par 4s that play the most here at Riviera. Maverick McNeely, Patrick Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Justin Thomas, Alex Noren, Cameron Smith, Cameron Young, interesting, Sung Jae, DJ, and Lonto Griffin. Let's take a look at Cameron Young. Rookie, very, very, very promising in terms of talent and ability. The irons have not played well coming to the PGA Tour. He has always been elite off the tee in his measured rounds on the PGA Tour, and in the Korn Ferry he was elite off the tee. The irons haven't translated. They're not this bad. They're certainly not Corey Connors or anything like that, but I don't think they're this bad. The putting has been good. You look at the Farmers, he actually lost strokes there and lost the previous year, and that's what's contributing to this. But generally, he putts pretty darn well. In the Shriners, he had a bad tournament, but otherwise, he's been pretty darn good. Look at the Sanderson Farms when he was a runner-up. He gained a bunch. So Cameron Young could be interesting. So there's a look at the 450 to 500 par 4s. Let's look at par fives. I'm going to do both par fives and 500 to 550, but strokes gained par five. Cantley, Smith, Fitzpatrick, Power, McNeely, John Rahm, Luke List, DJ Hideki, and Martin Laird. All right. So Martin Laird's been coming up a little bit here. He was 25th in par fours, I believe it was. And now top 10 on par fives. Very, very good. 500 to 550. Cantley, Power, Smith, McNeely, Matt Jones, Jordan Spieth, Mark Leishman, Eric Van Rooyen, Fitzpatrick, Luke List, and Pat Perez. Okay. I think this is the first time we've mentioned Eric Van Rooyen. There's Leishman. McNeely's been up there quite a bit. Smith has been up there quite a bit. Power seems like he's always up there because he's been on fire the past 7-8 months. Let's see. Oh, I tell you what I'm thinking now that I was looking at the filters, because I was thinking about what filters we might want to look, other filters we might want to use. Let's look at difficult to hit fairways. These fairways are historically difficult to hit. I mean, you look here. I mean, what's this? 4 straight years they were difficult to hit. 5, 6, 7, yeah. So notoriously difficult fairways to hit. Now let's look at some driving metrics here with difficult to hit fairways. And let's see how much this changes. So we've got 23 rounds here. Sure, that'll be okay. So I'll narrow it into the last 24. So Martin Laird never got it done with driving distance, but I do want to see driving distance on difficult to hit fairways. These guys either hit it so far that, bomb and gouge is their thing, or when it's difficult to hit, they can hit their 3-woods, their irons, or they're just that accurate with the driver. So I definitely want to see this. Your top 10 driving distance players on difficult to hit fairways. Luke List, Cameron Young, Brandon Hagee, Wyndham Clark, Will Zalatoris, Dylan Fratelli, Tyler McCumber, Johnny Vegas, Rory, and Scotty Scheffler. Oh, and Brandon Steele, with Scheffler and Steele tied for 10th. Just a quick search here of Martin Laird, 70th. But again, he's not one to depend on distance. Fairways, 7th. 5th in good drives gained. There we go. Look at that. Scrambling when it's difficult to hit the fairway. That's, very good to great. Good stuff there. So I like the spice you're cooking with there, Richard. I do. Let's see. Any other metrics that kind of pop off here? The rough is generally short here at Riviera, so I don't feel like that would be a filter that we should use. This is not a Pete Dye, Nicholas, or Don Ross. It's a 36-hole cut. So if you all don't have any other questions specific for players or anything like that, I'm going to go back to Excel for the last part of the show. So I'll give it a couple minutes if you all want to see a specific thing in Fantasy National. And again, I'm hoping that the chat settings that I changed last week make it quicker or easier. Because I had never changed the chat settings from when I started the channel, and I tried to change it to where you could type quicker. So, well, I'm going to go ahead and go to Excel. If a question comes in, I'll be more than happy to jump back to Fantasy National here. But moving to Microsoft Excel, let's take a look at the players that perform well here, specifically at Riviera for the Genesis, in some of the metrics that we've been looking at. Again, this is sorted by the average finish of the times they have been played. So, for example, Victor Hovland average finish of 5th sounds great. It was one event, so I don't put a whole lot of stock into it. I mean, it's Victor Holland. He's an elite player, so you can't ignore it. But let's look at some of these metrics that we've been looking at tonight using this Riviera performance specific spreadsheet. So let's first sort by, let's just do strokes gained approach. This I want largest to smallest. So your best strokes gained approach players here, specifically at Riviera. You got Colin Morikawa, who's played it twice. He does not have great finishes, average of 35th. It's Colin Morikawa. If he's not the leader in strokes gained approach, I'd be surprised if he's not in the top 5. So he's gaining 7, almost, about 60% more than the next highest person. Cool. Very, very good. But Colin Morikawa doing Colin Morikawa things, losing lots on the green. So let's see here. You've got Morikawa, Kazire, and Hovland. And take with a bit of grain of salt, they've only played it once. Cameron Tringali popped on several models. He's 3 for 4 making the cut. Now, only an average finish of 42nd, but the irons play well here. Cantley, 4 for 4, averages a top 15 finish. Taylor Gooch, 3 times, 3 for 3, average of a top 15 finish. Very high in the strokes gained approach. Xander, Finau, Cam Smith. Look, Cam Smith, you got the around the green and the approach. JT, Thomas Peters. Only played it twice. Okay. There's DJ. So there's a look at strokes gained approach of the guys that have played Riviera and their performance specifically at Riviera. I do want to look at around the green. So strokes gained around the green. Tagala played it last year. Didn't play all that well. He did make the cut, but was great around the green. Makes no surprise. It's probably no surprise. He played his college golf at Pepperdine, so he's used to California setups. Probably played some, if not a lot, Kikuyu and Poa. So no surprise there. Anytime you're talking around the green, Kevin Na, very good. Johnny Vegas, although he's 1 for 4 in making the cut, he's great around the green here. DJ, Bubba, 2 for 4. Matt Kuchar, 4 for 5 in making the cut. Henley, 3 for 3 with an average of a top 35 finish. Jordan Spieth, I'll be kind and say a top 30. 5 for 5 with an average of top 30. Okay. James Hahn, 4 for 4. Look at James Hahn here. He's got positive in everything. There's a name for you. 4 for 4, averages a top 20 finish. He is gaining in all 4 of the, what I like to call the umbrella stats, the main stats, off the tee, approach, around the green, and putting. Interesting. All right. Very good. Adam Hadwin, 5 for 5. Always good around the green, always good putting. Speaking of putting, let's take a look at putting. Strokes gained putting, largest to smallest. Come all the way back over here. All right. There's Ricky, Wyndham Clark, Zalatoris. So John Rahm, 3 for 3 here at Riviera. Lots of performance on the greens. Patrick Rogers, 5 for 5, a California guy, 5 for 5, average of a top 20 finish. Homa, Sam Burns, 2 for 3, not as much high-end success. Does putt it and iron it well around here. There's Kuchar, DJ, Adam Scott, your winner in 2020 at the Genesis. All right. Noren, 3 for 3. Alex Noren, you normally think of easy courses, but he's played Riviera well. JT Poston, 4 for 4 with an average of a top 30 finish. Putts it well around here. So good stuff there. Let's look at a few more bogeys avoided, because this is clearly going to be one of the main stats that I focus on this week. Bogeys avoided, and I will bring it over so you can actually see it. All right, bogeys avoided. Again, Victor Hovland, top, but only had one event, so yeah. DJ, no surprise, probably the most consistent player here at Riviera. John Rahm, Jordan Spieth, Kevin Na again. I'm going to scroll over just a bit so I can. Adam Scott, Thomas Peters, Matt Kuchar, Patrick Cantlay, Max Homa, Taylor Gooch, James Hahn again, Tony Finau, KH Lee, 3 for 3 with an average of a top 35. Xander, 4 for 4, average of a top, average is 16th place. Rory, 3 for 4. Bubba, Adam Hadwin. Again, another week where it seems like I'm gravitating towards Adam Hadwin, and it's been pretty darn successful the past couple of, or at least past 2 or 3 tournaments. Hadwin's played well. Didn't do me any favors this past week. It was one of the only reasons I didn't lose all of my ass. I just got my shit kicked in. Hadwin, Hoagie, Cantlay, they saved me from losing everything. So there's a look at bogeys avoided. I'm gonna skip par fours. I'm gonna go into par fours of the length here at Riviera. Par fours, 450 to 500. Excuse me. Let me scroll over so it. Oh God. Yeah. All right. So, of the length of par fours here at Riviera, Max Homa, Wyndham Clark, 2 events. Adam Scott, DJ, Carlos Ortiz, 2 for 3. Only averages a top 40 finish. He plays the par fours well here. There's Peters again, Taylor Gooch again. And Taylor Gooch has popped up a lot on these Riviera metrics. Averages a top 15 finish in 3 tries. Interesting. CT Pan, first time we've mentioned CT Pan tonight. There's Mark Leishman. He's 3 for 5. Sebastian Munoz, 2 for 2 with a top average of a top 35. Kokrak, 4 for 5 with an average of a top 40 finish. Again, top 40 doesn't sound great, but these are averages. So, there's got to be some high performances in there, at least you would think. Cantlay, there's Scheffler, Luke List. The last thing I'm going to look at is proximity. And proximity total. I think even more so than the 175 to 200. I think just total proximity is going to be what plays here. Victor Hovland, Morikawa, Zalatoris, all these guys have 1 to 2 events. DJ, Justin Thomas. It's important to note Justin Thomas hasn't played this event very well at all. I mean, he is 3 for 5, but he only averages a top 50. Something to note. Alex Noren, 3 for 3, top 30. Leishman again. Pat Perez, 4 for 5. Now, very middling finishes, but 4 for 5. There's Cantlay, there's Rory, Bubba again, Jason Kokrak again. First time we've mentioned Fratelli. He's good with the proximity, but he's 1 for 3. Harold Varner, 3 for 5 in making the cut, but averages a clunker of a made cut. Cam Smith, Tony Finau, Sergio, 3 for 4. Russell Henley, 3 for 3. There's Ortiz again, Hadwin, Xander. So there's a good look of the performance for guys specifically to Riviera. I'm going to sort it by average finish for you all. Again, I'll give it a couple minutes since the show went short last evening. Jump in chat. Is there anything specific you want to check before we sign off for the night? Any guys that you're thinking about? It looks like Richard had some decent spice there with Martin Laird. It'll be interesting to see how he rates out specific to my model. I was worried about the scrambling on difficult difficult to round courses, but he was great at scrambling on difficult to hit fairways. So be interesting to see where he kind of lines up. I kind of want to see where James Hahn lines up. That was a name that I really was kind of surprised as I came over to Riviera specific stats that he was playing well. That's going to do it for the Data Dive show. Again, guys, thanks for the patience as I do feel a lot better, but the voice is still scratchy. So I love the interaction. For all of your wagers that you've made so far at the Genesis, for any wagers that you're thinking about making at the Genesis, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.